Hi, my name's Wendy Ahlm, and I'm going to teach you today how I stretch watercolor paper for an 8x10 mat. It's an easy size to mount and frame and easily available, and I'll share along the way why I've chosen this size for this series of work and thought you might enjoy it. Okay, I'm going to start with why I'm doing this the way I'm doing it and what I found over time. One of my friends, her name is Shanwell, she's a painter, she recommended a very uniform frameable size, and I kind of wondered what she was talking about for the longest time until I really started framing my work and preparing to sell it. So framing size and art size makes a huge difference. And so this month I did 30 days of watercolor. I'm still finishing up, and I wanted something that was easy to frame, that I could post on my website for sale, and I can easily put in a little mailing envelope and ship out. So I wanted to frame in an 8x10 frame size, and mats come standard in that size, as you'll see. So I worked backwards to figure out what size watercolor paper I needed. I knew that when I put them in a frame that some of the border would be cut. So I wanted to be able to put little corners inside and make that disappear. And I measured my paper to do this, giving myself ½ an inch, knowing I was going to stretch the paper. So if I measure the inside of this piece, it's going to measure about 5 by 7. And if I measure with the border, we go to 6 by 8. So very standard size. So once I knew that, and I knew I was going to staple them, I made myself a template. And this, I'll kind of show you guys, was my template. It's 6 by 8, and then I cut the little corners out so that I could draw on marks and know where to guide my tape when I tape it. So there's a little tiny, I don't know if you can see those pencil marks on each corner, and you'll see where I tape it. Now I'm going to disclaim that no matter what, I want you to remember that this paper still will buckle a little bit, and later I'll post a video on how I completely flatten them. That's a whole other process. But for now, I'm just going to show you what this process is. There's a lot out there. You can find things on the internet, and you might find something that you like more. I have not found a watercolor pad with paper I like in this exact size, and this is the easiest way for me as far as a bound watercolor block. I could tape off a piece in a watercolor block, but I just thought this was easy for this exercise, and I had a block of paper that I had dropped and ruined the entire corner of, so I just tore off sheets, cut it up, and made it work for this. So if you have any paper that you've ruined a corner on, or scrap pieces, this is a really great little project for you to try. Alright, I'm going to move this out of the way. We're going to start with materials. So however many pieces of paper you need, I want you to go ahead and you cut those to 6 by 8, and then I used my template in order to do the corners in here. I've got something I don't need in here. Okay. This is called coroplast. Now coroplast is a corrugated cardboard. I used an old sign and cut it up. And these I cut up because I knew I'd have borders. These are 7 by 9. So 7 by 9, I fit a 6 by 8 paper on, and I'm painting 5 by 7. So I'm dropping an inch, and they frame in mats that are standard 8 by 10. Hopefully that helps you. You can also use gator board. I really love gator board, but it's harder to cut, and it's a little more expensive. This I found for free because it was an old sign. After election time, you might be able to find some signs. I don't know if you should take them without permission. You might want to track down the politician, but definitely if they leave them up past a certain date, they've got to get them down past a certain date after election time. So that gives you what I'm doing on these boards. Okay, you're going to need something to soak your water in. I use bottled water because we have a well and we have a lot of calcium in our water, so I don't want that to affect my paper, so I just use bottled water. You want paper tape. This is gummed paper tape. You can get it at any art supply store. I have not checked the hardware stores, but I know that art supply stores or online art supply stores have them. Okay, and then you're going to need a stapler that you can open up and staple with. This is just a little inexpensive, and lots of staples. So I have a box of staples here. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, and a sponge. You'll eventually need this. You're going to need a sponge. So the first thing I do is I fill my bin. This is just a plate I have that works for this size. I have a soaking tray, but I put it somewhere, and my studio had been used to raise baby chickens in for the last 7 weeks. They're now out in their coop and I have to clean the studio. But they kind of took over my whole studio life. So now I've got to reorganize and find where all my stuff is. So did you see how I just slid that in? So I filled the thing with water, and then I take my paper and I like to slide it in like that. Now when I put the next one in, I'm going to slide it under. So I slide it right in under there. Now I need to count how many pieces of this coroplast I have, because that's how many pieces of paper I want. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, so I have 2 in here. That's 3. 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that they're all in the water and under the water, and we're going to do 20 minutes. We want to leave this soak for 20 minutes. You're not going to have to wait for 20, but I will show you how to get ready for the next process. The next thing I'm going to do is prep and make sure my hands are dry. I wipe them all over my shirt. Your gummed paper tape. Now, of course, this is gigantic tape, so I make use and maximize it for this kind of stuff, and I cut each piece in half. So I'll show you what I mean. So I know that I'm going to need 12, 6 sides this side. Got a hair on there. And I'm going to need 12 pieces for the long side. So first thing I do is I roughly go over the size, and then I cut it right like that. And I make, these are my short sides. So that's 1, that's 2. There's no art to this. You do not have to do exact measurements. 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, I'm going to cut those in half. So those 6 are going to turn into 12. And then my long sides are the same way. I go over. See how I'm giving myself room to wrap around that coroplast? So 1, 2. These are about the length of my plate, actually. 3, 4. You can even do it this way. 5 and 6. Now, again, I'm not going to agonize about measuring. These are cut. They're later torn off and thrown away. So this, again, is not an art form either. I just cut right up the middle, like so. So each one of these, I'm going to cut in half. And then we're ready to go. All right, we're back. Hopefully the camera isn't shaking too much. All right, we've cut all our paper tape. We have soaked our paper for 20 minutes. And I forgot to mention, we also need paper towels. So I have some paper towels. Now I lift the sheet out and I kind of let it drain. And I'm going to soak my sponge just a little bit, just to make it not so dry. So I have a little bit of water in there. And then I like to get the water somewhat off. I lay it on the paper towel just quickly. And I got my coroplast, center this, centered on the sheet. And then I gently, from the center, squeeze the water out on this. Now I do 2 sets of staples. The first thing I do is that side, I squeeze again. That side, I squeeze it again, make sure it's even. And, oh, something was on there. Usually I don't worry too much if there's little things that come on it. Now, you have a choice. You can either do corners, which I think it stretches a lot nicer with corners than without. I've done it both ways. So, again, make sure that it's pulled tight. One more thing about gator board versus coroplast. Coroplast is a little too thin, just a little. Okay, now this one, you'll see, I could see it buckled a little, so I just pulled that staple out, and I'm doing it again. So if I stick my hand on the back of this, you'll see I have tape because I've used this so many times. They will poke through a little. You can either put a couple layers of tape to manage that, or use a second piece to keep yourself from getting stapled or, you know, cut things or tear clothes. Okay, so this is a point. Now I'm going to put the paper tape on. I pay close attention to what side is straight and what is cut, because I cut these in half. So I dip them in my water, and then I squeegee with my fingers off the excess. Now I have guide marks, and I use the straight edge again. This is cut. See how it's curvy? And then I put that on there, and I really just squish it with that sponge, and I go around the corner. Now I'm going to turn this and do the other side. So another short piece of tape. Again, I'll put this over here so you can see. I dip this in the water. I squeegee it. I check and see which side is my straight edge. I find those marks. I go a little outside the marks on this side, not into the artwork, because I don't want to cut off the, I don't want to go under my 5x7 size. I'd rather go slightly over than under. I wrap those around. So I might go and wipe that again. Now I need a long piece. So I take one of these, dip it in the water, squeegee it, and again, find my edge. Now I'm really pushing down on here so you can even see the crease, and then I wrap this and I wrap this. Then I need one more long piece. So again, I got 2 there. I dip it, I squeegee it, I find my straight edge, which is this side. I go on the outside of the pencil marks slightly. And then I wrap it. Now, left to its own devices, I use a lot of water when I paint. I soak my entire sheet multiple times. It's just saturated. That will let loose. The gum paper tape will let loose. So I staple my paper tape again. So again, I'm close to the other staple, but not like right on top of it. I do all 4 sides first. Then I start to fill it in. So now I'm going to go to my corners and then do the corners. This type, instead of diagonally this way, I just went straight along this edge. Now you'll notice, like, even there, I'm seeing the paper tape come up a little. I just run my sponge over it. And I do it again. Now I work my way around. I really try to make sure that my stapler is super flat against the surface. That goes straight in that way. All right. So I've gone all the way around. Now I will let this sit for at least a whole night to dry before I paint on it. I want this to stretch tight. I want it to be super, super dry. So I just let it sit overnight, and then the next day you can paint on it. I leave this on while I paint on it, and then again, I wait 24 hours before I go back and take the staples off. So I'm going to show you now how to remove the staples after it's dried. Now I'm going to disclaim this piece. I painted on it yesterday, I let it dry overnight, and then this morning I went in and painted on it again. So it's only been about 4 hours, and I'd prefer to wait a whole day, but I'm going to go ahead and take this off. I can flatten it later if it does buckle at all, just because it's a little premature on when I took the staples out. So I use a butter knife. You can use a palette knife. You want a really flat edge. You'll see I struggle sometimes depending on how tight these staples are. I never go towards the artwork because you can scratch the artwork. So do not do this. I go over the artwork so I don't hit it and scratch or cut it. I wedge under, I put my finger on there, I rock it back and forth, and boom, I just took out the staple. Now, I have a deep sense of satisfaction when I do this, a couple on each side. I also feel like it doesn't pop up a side all of a sudden and be hanging out there. So I usually take off 2 on each side as I go around. And it's kind of fun. I like spinning it. It's silly, I know, but this is, after you do so many of these, you get really sick of taking staples out, but it is satisfying. So you'll see, so far I haven't had any issues, but again, note that I'm working from the art side, pushing out so that if my thing slides, it's not going to cut the artwork. Now, one of the nice things that happens as you do this is your art will start, your tape will start to pull away from the work. You might have gotten some paint under there that will also seal it a little more, but I've noticed that as I pop these staples out, the gummed paper tape also starts releasing. And I'm going to show you how to get it off completely, which is really nice because you don't have to cut the artwork. And you have a little more room for underneath that mat when you frame. Now you'll notice I picked the easy ones first that aren't all the way pushed down. Sometimes I'll have a spot underneath them and they're easier to pull up. So the really tight ones I usually leave for last. That one's a little tight. And you'll see I have to kind of dig, which is another reason to make sure that that knife or palette knife is pushing away from the artwork. getting there. It's a lot of staples, and this is a little piece too, so a big gigantic one would take a lot more. This paper is 140-pound Arches cold press that I worked on for this. I really like painting on 300-pound because you don't have to worry as much about stretching it. You can just paint on it. But again, I had kind of dropped an entire block of big sheet paper and ruined it. So this is what I used. So I now take my knife and I can see the little poppy parts, like little areas where it had popped up, and I kind of try to start popping my knife into there. I'm not forcing anything. I have some water on the table, so I keep getting things wet, which kind of defies the purpose. But I do want to just pop this knife in where I can, and then when I can break it, I'll pop it and break it. So now I can start to really get this off. See how it came right off. Now here it stuck a little, and that's fine. It's going to be under the mat, but I try to get what I can off of it. Now again, I'm going to disclaim this because I did not leave this completely overnight since I repainted on it this morning, but I had it ready and thought I'd put in one video how to take this apart. Now remember, I did staples. You'll see on this one I did not do staples on my corners. I do like to do staples on the corners, but I missed it on this one. Alright, now you can pick some of this stuff off or leave it. It doesn't matter. Again, this will be under the mat, but it's pretty flat. Now I have a process for flattening them even more if I think they need flattened more. This is pretty darn flat. There's no buckling in there. Once I put those corners on, it will sit well in a mat. But I'm going to show you in a separate video how I flatten these a lot more so that you don't have any anxiety about buckling, but it's still flat, pretty darn flat. That's it. That's all there is to it. Thank you everybody for watching.